video 3 journal entry, and the first question that was asked is, how did you consider your planning for your intro lesson plan? And when I first started writing the lesson plan for the water cycle, I definitely was very focused on the fact that my students the information that they needed to know would be relayed to them. I don't think that I was very aware of how to connect with my students and how to connect like the idea of the water cycle to my students' understandings. I definitely had fun activities for them to do, but I don't think that they're activities that were unique to the water cycle and would really help them understand. Now that I've revised my lesson plan, how do I think about lesson planning differently? I think I'm definitely more aware of students and what would be beneficial for them in the lesson. And I think I'm also aware of what could go wrong in a lesson, and more aware of looking at, okay, what are things that could go smoothly in this lesson plan, and then those things that I think will go smoothly, how could there be a bump in the road with them? What did I consider when I thought about my students? I definitely became more aware of catering a lesson plan towards students' interests. They're the ones who are learning the information. They're the ones who need help understanding the information. So I think I became more aware of how to make this information applicable to them and make it interesting and make it fun so that it's something that they're excited to learn about. Um, yeah, what were misconceptions, knowledge, and student difficulties? I think, yeah, kind of like what I was saying. Those things in my lesson plan that I thought were going to go really well, some of them didn't go very well, so I think I was just challenged to become more aware of what those things that I think might go right, how they could actually go wrong. And yeah, I think I became a lot more aware of where students might struggle, and that struggle is to be expected in a lesson no matter what it is. What technological ideas did I take into consideration? When I first did my lesson plan, I wasn't really planning on using technology at all, just because I kind of wanted my students to interact with the water cycle rather than use technology. And when it boiled down to it, I ended up using a video to kind of just help ingrain the idea of the water cycle being a continual process, and helping my students understand that. And then when my first finalized lesson plan, I had 2 videos, and that was just too much. So whenever I revised my lesson plan, I ended up just cutting one of the videos out and keeping one of them in. Um, have you incorporated scientific modeling into your lesson plan? Yes. My second lesson plan, I had the students up and moving around, and they were given the option to either to somehow model the lesson plan with their bodies, whether it was through actions or whether it was there are different stations throughout the room, and they pretend to be precipitation for one cycle, and then they'd be like, okay, so I'm rain now, and then they'd get to one station in the room and just kind of move around. And I gave the students the freedom to decide how they wanted to model the water cycle. When I taught the lesson the second time, they decided that they wanted to do hand action. So I think precipitation was like this, and evaporation was like this or something. So yeah, I used that modeling to kind of allow the students to make this idea of the water cycle more their own. Um, yeah, and so, yeah, I chose to incorporate that just so the students, it would be theirs so that they could remember it more. Because if I were up there telling them, okay, this is the action for this, they'd be a lot less likely to remember it than if they were coming up with the idea themselves. And that just kind of helps them in their learning. Because, yeah, it gives them ownership for these actions and these ideas, and helps them remember the concept better. And then how did I incorporate technology into my lesson plan? Like I said, I had a couple of videos, and for my revised lesson plan, I ended up taking one of the videos out because it was just almost too much and it was kind of repetitive. And the one video that I did use the second time, it was very helpful. I follow the suggestions of my peer reviewers and like pause the video throughout the whenever concepts were brought up. So like after the video defined precipitation, we paused it and we discussed it. And we're like, what is precipitation? What do you guys wonder about precipitation, and what do you think about it? And we wrote it on the board, and as we went through each concept, we wrote it out on the board and then made the connection that it's one big cycle. And that technology was very helpful because it gave technology a little bit of a voice in the classroom. So I wasn't the only one talking to them, and the questions they had could either be answered by me, and what wasn't answered by me would be answered by this informational video. And then we had a discussion about it, and the video kind of spurred discussion and allowed the students to ask questions and just mention what they noticed about the water cycle and what they were learning.